new to me, my name is Sarah B. Boynton. I'm wonderful. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I do counseling scopes during the weekdays, and I do crazy fun scopes in the evening. And hey, Superfro, not sure if I'm going to be able to scope tonight because I am going to a pole dancing studio, and I'm not sure that they will allow cameras in there, but if they will, I will absolutely bring you on that journey because I love finding creative ways to work out with my body. So this will be one of them. But wanted to share with you guys this amazing content that I picked up from Bill Nye last night, and it just gave me this huge revelation. And so what he was talking about in particular, someone had asked him about the teachers in his life who have really influenced him. And one that he brought up was his third grade teacher, whose name was Miss Cochran. And Miss Cochran had told him, hey, Joey Giggles, we're talking about Bill Nye and the seminar I attended last night at Stanford. And Miss Cochran, his third grade teacher, had told him in third grade that there were more grains of sand on the beach than there were stars in the sky. And many of us know that to be true. But in his third grade brain, he could not even fathom, because he said to himself, hey, Francis, Bill Nye says to himself as a third grader, I look to my right when I'm on the beach and sand everywhere. I look to my left when I'm on the beach and sand everywhere. Behind me, I dig and all there is sand. And this woman, Mrs. Cochran, must be crazy to think that there are more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand on the ground. And that was interesting to me because he also then started sharing pictures that were recently taken from Saturn, and I won't get too scientific with this, but pictures that were taken from Saturn, and you see the Earth and you get this idea about how small we are if we are indeed alone in the universe. So he was talking about the Earth from Saturn looks like this little speck, right? I know. And what he said about this is, I'm basically a little speck that's standing on this sand that is all a bunch of little specks on this Earth that's a tiny little speck with these other planets that are other little specks that are just floating around in space. And it just made him feel very small. But I think in feeling small, it also takes some of the pressure off, right? And I also think that feeling small, it also means there's a great deal of responsibility. So this balance that we often talk about in this scope, right? It's so surreal. But me, as a mental health counselor, took it in my mind even a step further. And what I came up with was interesting, particularly because of the response that my husband has. And I'm going to share that with you guys. Thank you guys for the hearts and thank you for being here. The idea was that there are actually more neurological connections in our brain. We have more brain capacity than there are even stars in the sky, than there are grains of sand. We have more neurological connections here in our tiny little brain that's like 2 fist sizes. This is our left and right hemisphere. Hey, Reese, we're talking about my takeaways from seeing Bill Nye last night, and he was talking about how small we are. So we have more neurological connections. This is my own contribution, not something he had talked about. But we have more neurological connections in our brain that's this size. And it made me think of, if you guys have ever seen the end of Men in Black, you know that it zooms out and you see that there are 2 extraterrestrial creatures that are playing with some marbles, and essentially our galaxy is this entire thing in this little marble. So my husband's response was very interesting because as I said this about our 2 brain hemispheres and having more neurological connections in our head than there are stars in the sky, than there are grains of sand on the ground at the beach, I started realizing this, and we're zooming way, 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 way out, kind of like the end of Men in Black, like I'm saying. And what he said is, actually, it's interesting because our neurological pathways often look very similar to the same way that a solar system looks, the same way that what's going on in outer space looks. It looks so similar, you guys, to what's going on in our brain, if you can conceptualize that. And I think it's huge, because I don't know if we recognize the amount of possibility that we have, the amount of brain power that we have. What we have in here is so big that it outnumbers what's going on out there. Isn't it just amazing? It really, really is. And so the interesting tidbit that my husband offered, and it's fun to ponder because sometimes we wonder what if, but he said, what if this is mimicking all these little specks that exist all the way out into outer space, and that actually is this representation of like a giant's brain, that we're all these little neurological connections. And it was a fun idea to play with, because then I started to think about how our relationships are different synapses. Hey, Meekant, I might be too far into this topic to go back. You might have to go back and watch the replay, because I've gone really, really zoomed in and then really, really spread out. And we're talking about the takeaways that I had after seeing Bill Nye last night. Thank you guys for all the hearts. But just like leaves and cells and veins, I know they all, and that's what I wanted to say, is there is this common representation and repetition that exists in nature, that exists in science. And one of the pieces that I think is particularly interesting is we spend a lot of time viewing science or religion. Can they coexist? And I think the answer is yes, they can absolutely coexist. We have to recognize that there's a balance, just as there's a balance in everything, nature, science. And it's important to remember that. And sometimes we get so focused on what's going on in our day-to-day that we fail to recognize the miracle that is this repetition. We are woven into the fabric of the universe. Hey, Wild Bill. Again, getting really deep in this topic. What do you guys think about what I've said today? I know that this is like, I was just so jazzed after I heard it. And then there was a student behind me in the lecture who had asked, howdy. There was a student behind me in the lecture who had asked, hey, gentlemen in Minnesota, hey, Elliot, I'm sorry you guys are catching me so late. You should watch this replay, because we're talking about some really big ideas, and I would love to have you watch that back. But there was a student behind me who had asked Bill Nye about science and children being invested in science, but also struggling to have their common needs met. He talked about how he grew up in Peru, and there was violence, and there was an economic crisis. And it reminded me why I do what I do as a counselor, because we have to meet this idea about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And one day I'll talk about that on Scope. But basically, when we don't have these basic needs met, we can't focus or be mindful on the things that we love. It reminds you of Carl Jung's collective consciousness. Yes, Carl Jung is amazing. And if you guys are not familiar with him, he is the father of client-centered therapy. He is the reason that therapists and clients have such successful relationships, because unlike what many people think of with the couch and Freud, there was a huge disconnect. We learn that our relationships really are predictive about whether someone's going to be successful. And I don't just want you guys, thank you so much, I don't just want you guys to think about that with a counselor-client relationship, but think about it also with a parent-child relationship, or a teacher and a student. These are all really important things to remember. So those are some facts that I wanted you guys to chew on today. I really appreciate you being here, indulging me in this larger than life idea that I have. And I think although it makes you feel very small perhaps in the universe, I hope it's also a humbling experience, and you recognize that we are fabric that's woven into the entirety of this system that's known as the universe. Hey, Melinda, I got really deep there. I hope you can catch the replay. But I hope you guys have a beautiful evening. I am going to sign off because I am getting ready to go to a pole dancing class. Like I said, I like to challenge my body in interesting ways. I'll share this last little tidbit with you. I'm wonderful. And this last little, well, it's not really a tidbit. It's more of these little elephant earrings. They always make me happy when I wear them because they were gifted to me by a client that I left back in Phoenix. And she absolutely loved elephants. And every time I wear them, I think about the work that we did together. So thank you guys for being here. Lots of love. And I hope that you are off to a beautiful start to your weekend. You're in Phoenix. I just left Phoenix 8 months ago. I live in the Bay Area now. Hey, Mad Max, make sure you guys catch the replay. All right, lots of love. It's so hard to say goodbye when you guys are giving all those beautiful hearts. Cheers.